Parenting's hard, you don't know what to do. You're blaming your kids, but it's probably you. You love your kids and that you can trust. Just remember your kids don't suck.
Welcome to Your Kids Don't Suck, cultivating closeness with your children through non-coercive conscious parenting. We're your hosts, Cara Tedstone and Rythea Lee. Let's dive in and grow together.
Today we're going to talk about obedience. And I've been thinking about what does that mean. I was even thinking, Cara, that maybe we want to look up a definition of obedience.
Yeah, you want me to do that?
Sure.
Have to learn how to spell it first. Hee hee. Okay, obedience from dictionary.com. Compliance with an order, request, or law or submission to another's authority.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So I instead of like trying to talk about this in any kind of coherent way, I thought we could just brainstorm together, like what we want to get into, like almost like an outline or just like what your thoughts are about it. Because I was thinking about it this morning that it's about fear.
Yeah. Like
Fear-based parenting. Fear-based parenting.
Yes.
And the parents' really honest belief that if they get their children to behave a certain way, that they're helping their children to be functional people in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I believe parents really think that that is true. That if they can get their child to be polite, to not make a mess, to clean up after themselves, to like dress themselves and do good in school and, have friends and, be high achievers. I don't know, all the things.
Yeah.
That they will then actually be happy and they will be safe. Yeah. And so much of parenting is about obedience. Well, there's this thing that Vivek always talks about where he says that parents don't realize when they're being coercive that they're actually creating the exact opposite of what they say they want. That's his like whole thing, is to take coercion apart so you can see that it actually doesn't make sense what you're doing if you truly want to have closeness with your kid. And it's something about fear, because once your child is relating to you as someone to be scared of, that starts to undermine their entire sense of self, like deeply in terms of attachment. Like it starts to undermine their trust in their own decisions because they actually have to be working on their survival all the time once they're scared of you. That's going to take precedence, is trying to survive with the parent because the parent can now punish them or withdraw their love or approval or punish them, or you know what I mean? Like once that's happening, instead of the child using all the energy to tune into their own truth and their own boundaries and their own forms of expression, they're having to attend to the parents. And that's going to be what they're going to be developing as they grow up, a whole people pleasing, controlling externals experience. I was thinking about how people say no to toddlers all the time.
Right.
Don't open that door. No, we don't play with that. Put that down. Don't put your hands in there. Hey, come back over here. That's hot. That's dirty, and then
yucky.
That's coercion.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but what would the opposite be? Like if I had to do a video of the opposite, well, it would be, I'm going to put like actually things on the cabinet so they're closed so I don't actually have to say no all day.
Yeah. Baby proofing the house and letting them have range of whatever is there. Another thing,
and then also letting them take all the shit out of a cabinet, like as long as it's safe. Like who the fuck cares?
And the cat treats is a story. Aaliyah has never once put a cat treat in her mouth.
Oh,
not one time. Because she is very cautious, probably by nature. I don't take credit for her, not shoving every single thing into her mouth, but she does put a lot of other things into her mouth. So it's interesting. The cat treats, though, we were talking about it, me and Sanju, we were kind of laughing about it because like we've never told her, no, don't put that in your mouth, or like don't eat that. Those, we've never said that. I've just included her in giving the cats treats with me since she was a little baby, like since she was really, really tiny. Like I'd have her in my arm and we'd give the cats treats together. And, you know, if she got one in her mouth, I would probably have a little bit of anxiety about it. I'd be worried that like maybe she could inhale it because they could potentially be a choking hazard. But we have always given the cats the treats together. And I've always just said like, yummy for the cats. Like Stella likes the cat treats. And like maybe if we put one next to her, she'll eat it. And like we can give it to Kiwi and oh, he's sniffing it. And like it's a big deal. Like it's a long game, I guess. It's a playful thing. And we were just remarking on that the other day, you know, she has never once even attempted to give the cats treats to herself because as soon as she sees them, she knows that they're for them and they are also just that she has free access to them. Like they're just on the floor or they're in the toy, or they're in the shaker thing that we give the cats. And she just always gives them to them and doesn't really think about it. I don't think it's not off limits, you know, it's not enticing for her to like try to get into. And I feel like that's kind of how our house is, like with everything. Like we don't really tell her no. I have this like cabinet file here that she gets into when she comes upstairs to my office. She gets into it all the time. I don't tell her don't touch it. I just put it back. I just like later, like she'll just play with it for a second. And then when she's done, I just like put it back.
You're making me realize this whole idea that I learned when I first started doing non-coercion, that Vivek Patel taught me, that children will use anything and certain things to what's the word, claim their autonomy.
Mhm.
So, you know, they'll use food, they'll use screens, they'll use whatever to say, you can't control me.
Yeah.
They use all kinds of things. You know, I'm going to say something kind of weird, but like I was working with in one of my groups, someone had a child who wouldn't poop.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
She would hold her poop.
Yeah.
And I was explaining that she must feel really, really controlled because
Yeah.
she needs to find something that she has control over, and that's the best she can do.
Yeah.
She's a little kid, like a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And kids will find things and they'll even do things that really bother the parents because they're just trying to show I have some power. I have some power. I have a little bit of power. It's funny. Me and Tori were talking about something last night. We were in the bathroom. I get really, really triggered at night. That's just the theme you're going to learn if you're listening to these podcasts. My daughter won't go to sleep by herself, but it's too scary for her, but then she also won't go to sleep. So I stay up with her trying to get her into the damn bed. I mean, it's like the theme of our lives. And last night we were up till 1. We were up to, no, probably 1:30. Can you believe that? It used to be midnight. Now it's starting to be later and later and later. And I start losing my absolute mind. And my partner has to go to bed early because he gets up at 5 a.m. because he works at a school. So it's me late at night trying to be non-coercive. Anyway, so we were in the bathroom and I said something like, and you keep me up and you keep me up. Like it's so hard because then you keep me up so late. And Will says from outside, you choose to stay up this late.
Right.
And she goes, he says, you choose to. What does he mean? I was like, well, honestly, I have all the power. I'm acting like a victim right now. I'm acting like you're forcing me to do this. But the truth is I have all the power in our relationship. And she goes, oh, okay. And then she goes, but you know, I do feel really bad, Mom, because I do feel like I do keep you up every night. And then we got in bed that night. She goes, I feel so bad that I can't get to bed earlier, Mom. I'm sorry that I do this. She was so empathetic. And this is very new that in the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year, my daughter has empathy for me in a huge way. It blows my mind. And she said, I tried and just can't do it. I said, well, I think you might have ADHD. I think this might be part of your ADHD. At about 11 o'clock at night, you just start bouncing off the walls and you start having great ideas about everything. I understand. And she said, oh, I think I need to turn my phone off. So my child is almost 12. Think about this. She says, I think I need to turn my phone off by like 10 and then come upstairs because she also wants to go to school in the fall. So she wants to start practicing going to sleep early. Everything I'm saying that she's saying is from her. Do you realize that?
Mm-hmm.
She's brainstorming how she can go to bed early. She also sees that it's affecting me in a way that doesn't feel good to me. She also, as she got in bed, she goes, Mom, I don't eat breakfast early enough. And I feel like I don't eat, like sometimes I don't eat till 1, and that does not feel good. And I'm like, "Do you want me to help you with that?" She goes, "Yes." I do try to feed her, but a lot of times, long story, she doesn't get it in her mouth until 1 o'clock or something. I said, "I will really work on getting you your breakfast earlier and blah 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 blah." And then this is all initiated from her. And that might not sound like, people think, "Oh, you must just have a naturally communicative, easy kid." That is not what is happening. It's that all this work I've done to let go of controls is coming into fruition now, where she can think about her well-being, and she can think about her habits. And she's been drinking Starbucks for the last 2 or 3 years a lot. And she recently decided it doesn't feel good. She doesn't want to have it anymore. She decided that, not me. And people don't understand that if I had been controlling all these things, we would just be in power struggles all the time, and our relationship would be that.
Yeah.
And so, because I haven't focused on obedience, I'm focused in on collaboration, communication, feelings, emotion, giving her great attention, getting therapy for myself, working with my partner on my own stuff. There's room for like brainstorming together, and it's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact opposite of obedience.
Yeah. And what's hard for me is to explain that, I think, when it comes to working with younger children, that you can still embody that in a younger, like in a
Mm.
relationship with a younger child, because you can, but it just often does look just a lot more playful, because your younger child is maybe having a tantrum or having big feelings, and you're obviously not going to be able to negotiate or collaborate in that way and hear from your child that, they are considering your perspective. It's obviously very parent led, the
But
communication. So
when they're little.
when they're really young. So explaining how to do that, from in my approach, like I find it hard to articulate exactly what that looks like how to show through my just words, like talking about it. It's hard for me to explain how I do that day to day with Aaliyah. But that's,
Can I ask you some questions?
yeah,
When so the hardest thing for you is that there's like a demand all the time. Like,
yes,
this, mama, give me this, pick me up, blah
yeah,
blah,
eat,
tell me care.
eat, eat, eat all day, eat.
Okay, and so you just make her food all day?
I want to say yes and no, because yeah, I do make her a lot of food. It's not like I don't. I'm not one of the parents who say like, okay, well, we have breakfast now, and then we have a snack, and then we have lunch, and then we have a snack, and then we have dinner, and then you have a snack, and you go to bed. That's ideal. I think that's a great eating schedule and works for a lot of families. I tried to do that with my young child, but we also did baby-led weaning. So she was eating what we were eating, and I was just making her adult food, not giving her like purees and stuff. And it was not happening. It just wasn't happening. As soon as she could communicate by basically getting over to the fridge or the cupboard to tell me she wanted more food, that's what she was doing
Mm-hmm.
from like as young as like 7, 8 months. Like she'd crawl over there and she would just point at it. And she was telling me eat. Like that's what was happening. And I felt like I wasn't being I felt like I wasn't being very not just responsive, but like honoring of potentially her appetite if I was gonna reject. Like if I was gonna say, no, honey, like you can eat in an hour. That really didn't feel right to me. And like I have a fear that as I say that, people are gonna think I'm ridiculous because it's literally like just an hour, you
I'm
know?
with you. I think that when kids want to eat, they should be able to eat. That's just so you know where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I know. But that's kind of like if listeners are thinking that, like I hear you also. I kind of hear where people are coming from when they say, even some feeding experts that I follow on Instagram, whatever, these pediatric feeding experts, however they're trained, maybe occupational therapists, but they'll say like feeding schedules are really helpful. But you just got to trust me. It wasn't working for Aaliyah. It really wasn't, because it would be incessant demanding. I genuinely was worried that if I didn't feed her, she'd be starving for the next hour. How could I know? So I had this was my fear, was that I was going to be like withholding food from her, and I felt really sad about it. I was like, no, it's a real shame. Like I don't want to deny her, the poor baby, of food. So now it's just always been
Well,
like,
but also, what about teaching your child that they get an impulse to be hungry and they get food? Like, I don't see
exactly.
what's
That
wrong
was
with
the
that.
other part of it too, was like, I definitely want her to eat intuitively. So for me to hold all the power with like the access literally to the food, I mean, it's not like, yes, I could put out snacks at her. Like I've tried this, putting out snacks at her level for her to grab at. Sometimes she wants something else. There are ways for us to kind of collaborate around that. But to answer your question, yeah, I basically try to honor her. Like when she asks for food, I might say like, baby, I just got my coffee. Like because we just had breakfast. I just got my coffee and just sat down. Like, I'm gonna take 10 minutes and then I'll get you something to eat, right? Like I'll set like some of my own
How does
boundaries.
that go? How does that go?
It's hit or miss. It's hit or miss. Sometimes she's totally cool with it. And now she's almost 19 months, so she can communicate a lot better than she could, obviously, several months ago. Now she'll nod and she'll go, yeah, yeah. And then she'll go off and play. Or sometimes I'll even use a timer because she just loves this timer that we have, and I'll
That's so
set it.
great.
Yeah, and I'll say, baby, you know what? We just had breakfast and she's eaten a lot. It's not like she refused, because if she refused, then I'm not a mom that's like, no, you eat what you eat and nothing else. Like I will provide plenty of options for her. So I make sure that she's eaten something. She asks maybe a few minutes later, and I'll set a timer. I'll say, baby, we just ate. Mommy really needs a break. Mommy's back hurts or something. And I'll tell her that. And I'll say, like, mommy's neck hurts. Just gonna finish my coffee, and then I'll set the timer. How about that? 15 minutes, 10 minutes? And she'll be like, yeah. And I'll do that. And I'll be like, when the beep goes off, I'll get you another snack. But yeah, I guess
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is like in the non-coercive approach that I take with her, I wouldn't just say, no, we only have snacks at this time, because
Right.
that doesn't work for her. I did try that because I don't think there's anything inherently really wrong with that. Like if your kid does well. Like I have a
Right.
friend whose son does great with a schedule of eating. He doesn't ask for snacks between. He just doesn't. He's not interested. My daughter is extremely hungry all the time. And so that's what we do is I kind of just have to set my own boundary being what I control inside of myself, not telling her, baby, stop asking. I need you to go play with your toys now. That would be like a coercive thing.
Yeah.
Like, let me tell you what to do. Instead
Right.
of say, baby, I'm going to have my coffee now. And in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or I might give her some options just so she can feel like she's choosing. Then I'll definitely get you a snack. I'd love to help you. It's kind of like in the video that you made, with the
Mm.
I'm just in the middle of something, in 20 minutes, does that sound good? And your kid's like, yeah. It's like I'm
Well,
still
it's
meeting your
about
need.
yes. It's about finding a
Yeah, it's finding a
yes.
yes, because sometimes I actually feel like I literally cannot. Like I just sat down, like I have many mornings like this where I'm completely on my own with her for hours before our caregiver comes. And it feels incessant. It really does. It feels like she's saying eat, actually. Probably she is saying it every 5 minutes. Like that's not an exaggeration. And sometimes I feel like I'm gonna burst into tears if I have to get her another snack. Like I just can't. I haven't even eaten myself. It's like I have to tell her, I just can't right now. Like I'm gonna eat my own breakfast first, and I'll happily share my toast with you. But like I'm gonna be sitting on the couch right now for the next 10, and I can set a timer for a time that, works for me. But that's what I feel like I do when it comes to non-coercion and setting boundaries. I don't try to control her. I just tell her yeah, like finding the yes. Like how can I meet her need, but also my need, and set my own boundary within myself. I just look to myself and my behaviors, not hers.
Well, I want you to know that a lot of parents would take that and make that coercive, what you just said.
That I know. That's why I haven't really
They
said
would
it
say,
before,
well,
because it's
yes,
easy
I'm
to.
setting my boundary when I say I'm not driving you there today, or I'm not going to give you food, or that's my boundary. I don't feel
Yeah.
like making it right now, or I don't feel like staying up with you, or most parents say boundaries are their own, controlling themselves, but they're not aware of the power dynamic or the power differential.
Yeah, that's what we
Um,
should say more about, because that's why I kind of hesitate to use even the word boundary, because I feel like it gets misconstrued. I don't use that as a way to then just like shut her up or never help her out or never get her, I basically don't use that as a way to control the situation. I still honor that she has a request or a need, or wants something
right,
from me. And I
right.
try to meet that as well. Like that's where I go with it then. I do set the boundary and say like, baby, I need to have my coffee. Like I really need to sit down, or I just need to do this, or I need to finish this dish, or I need to whatever. And if she has feelings about that, then she has feelings about it, and I'm working on being okay with that. But I don't use that as like a, well, I said no, sorry, baby, that's it. That's the end of it. Stop crying and leave me
Right,
be. It's
right,
like, oh,
right.
wow, yeah, it was really hard for you to wait, like maybe, 5 minutes, or we try to collaborate on a solution that then gets her with the yes at the end.
Yeah.
But it's hard to talk about because I hear people, even as I'm saying that, I hear people kind of coming at me with, well, you can't always say yes to your kid. They need to learn no. You can't just always
Well,
need to.
also, right, people say the world is full of
Right.
no's. You have to train your child to be able to cope with no. Like you're just spoiling your child and
Yeah.
you're just creating entitled brats. This is what everybody says about non-coercion. I think when people say that, see, I can say that in the beginning when your child's littler, you are trying to find yes as much as possible because you want your child to feel they have power, they have choice, they have possibilities. They're not hemmed in when they're in your home and when they're with you and when they're in a relationship with you, because life is full of no's and they will interface with no constantly in their lives. Constantly. They're going to want things they can't have. They're going to want people to treat them ways that they don't treat them. They're going to want they want to live somewhere they can't live. They want whatever. They want their room to be a different room. I mean, life is full of no's, and you want your relationship to have as much yes as possible. And I think if you don't, like, I think I'm learning now that non-coercive, conscious, collaborative parenting is a very long arc,
Yeah.
because all that I worked so hard, practically killed myself to stay open to with her and say yes to, now I can see why that was useful. So I feel like you pay up front, Kara. I want to tell you that. Like, in the beginning, when it's so hard and you feel like you're being controlled by your kid and manipulated and you're having to give yourself up and sacrifice so much, later that's going to what that's going to turn into, as far as I've seen with my kid and a couple of my other friends and Vivek, and is that eventually your child will start to really care about you as much
Yeah.
as you care about them. Because if you model care, consideration,
Yes.
empowerment, they start to return that and it
Yeah.
becomes an exchange. You can negotiate lots of your needs as your child becomes a teenager.
Yeah. That's kind of what is hard for me to find ways of like really backing up because my kid is so young and right now it just looks, I think, to everybody like I'm being controlled by her, like you said, like she just
Yeah.
bosses around.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but it's not that simple. Like I have to say, it's really not that simple. It's not that I'm just sitting back and being like, well, whatever Aaliyah says, I have to do. That's just not what's going on internally for me. Part of it is like definitely a self-sacrifice. Yes, I definitely am putting our relationship first, as we do in non-coercion. But it's really not just that simple either. There's a lot in there that I have to internally kind of figure out. Like, I'm not just sitting there and saying, even when I really don't want to, right? Like with the eat thing or whatever the demand is, if I really, really don't want to, I shouldn't do that with her because I'm going to be resentful and I'm going to be pissed off. And I know myself, I will get angry. I won't explode at her. I'm not an explosive parent, but I am an internally ragey person. I will
Yeah.
definitely be mad at my daughter if I go in, like, for example, we have a basement playroom. She wants to go downstairs and I, like, again, just sat down or something after, like, literally not sitting down all morning and kind of going with every single decision she
Right.
wants to make.
Right.
I go down in the
Right.
basement and sit on the cold, hard floor and play for another 20 minutes. I'm gonna be
Right.
so mad. I'm gonna be so mad. The play is gonna be fake. It's gonna be inauthentic. I'm gonna be like,
Right.
robot mommy. Like I put on my
Yeah.
robot mommy mask and I'm like, oh, eat,
Right.
eat, like play, play, play. But I actually inside I'm pissed and I'm about to like cry because I'm so overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I try not to do that. I try to get really tuned into what it is I need. And from there, I will set the boundary that meets my needs, but then also hers. So for the basement thing, not right now, baby. I really just want to eat my toast and I'll set a timer or whatever it is, right? Maybe we could watch a show together or something. Like I'll give her like a different option where she gets the connection with
Mm,
me. Sit next to
mm,
me. Another one I use is sit next to me. She wants to climb on me. Sometimes I can't handle it. I'm touched out. It's too much. It hurts my stomach. Like I'm just over
mm.
it. I will say to her, instead of letting her just climb all over me and then getting resentful and snapping later, I will just say, baby, just sit next to me. You can sit right next to me and we'll do a big cuddle and I'll sit next to you and I'll drink my coffee. And she'll do that. She'll sit right next to me. She has no problem because I know it's always the connection she's seeking.
Mm.
So I've learned this through like trial and error and through failing, that if I just figure out what it is she needs, it's always connection at a young age. Like it's always connection. Yes, there's like like the basic needs, hungry, tired, blah blah. But also when it's like the pulling on me and the demands, like I know she just wants mommy's attention and connection.
It's really nice that you explain to her what you're doing from a really
Yeah.
genuine, I'm a whole person and this is what I need right now. And, when kids have autonomy, when they have some power that you have honored their power, they will have a lot more room for that.
Yeah. Well, I
You
notice
know,
it a lot in her peers, parents who just say no to their kid all the time. I can just kind of see this difference. Like it's very clear to me when there's a young child and a parent saying like, no, don't do that. Stop what you're doing. Come over here. Stay here, please. And it's more directional and it's more like about behavior. For example, like she sometimes says bye to people before they've left our house because she wants them to go because she wants just our time. And I'll say like,
mm-hmm.
oh, maybe they're gonna stay a few more minutes, but like you and I can play together while they're here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, yeah, let's kick them out. Okay, time to go, guys. Like Aaliyah wants you to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it's her want that she's done with the company and wants her mommy time, but she can't just have her mommy time in that moment because our friends are still over. So I
Right.
have to explain to her just from like a very I try to be just an equal. Like she's my equal, and I'm just saying like, oh yeah, they're still here. I know you want them to go. I see you waving by, and they are going to leave really
Mm.
soon. And so while they're here, maybe we could make some cupcakes like with her toys or do whatever
Right.
together.
Right.
Like we can get a snack together.
Mm-hmm.
She could have a sip of my water. Like I'll just try to connect with her in that moment and talk to her. I'll always bring my attention back to her. I don't like change the environment or get up from what I'm doing constantly to meet her. I just really try to put our relationship first and our connection first.
I feel like the word boundary is really charged and confusing.
Yeah,
Because in
because
some of what we say with non-coercion is no boundaries, no limits, which is really, really triggering for everybody. And everyone's like, well, that's just fucking insane.
well, do you think that's
Like
even
that's just,
true?
well, is it true? It's just that people use the word boundary and limits to be coercive. That's the main way people
That's
are
right.
coercive.
Yeah, I so agree. That's why I'm
So if
like,
we use it at all, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, right. I'm just making a boundary when I say you
yeah,
you have to do this, you have to do that, or
I
I
know.
won't do this, I won't do that." Can I say one thing? Like, I'm trying to in hearing you, I'm trying to say when Will yelled and he said, "She's not forcing you,"
Yeah.
right? Last night we stayed up till at least 12:30, maybe one, and guess what we were doing? We were playing Uno. And there's these moments. Luckily, I'd taken a nap. So I'd taken a nap. So I was resourced. I was like, okay, I can do this because I slept for 45 minutes earlier. So I had it in me. But there are these moments where I have to decide what's more important. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
What is more important? Is it more important for me to go to sleep and get 8 hours of sleep? Or is it more important to play Uno with my kid and really have fun? And I really sit there and try to decide because she's really asking for something. She has no power in her life. She can't get in the car or go anywhere, or you know what I mean? She has no money. She
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
has no power.
Yeah.
And she wants to play Uno. So if you put that in a context, if you put her
Right.
wanting to play Uno, and my partner was up also, and the three of us had like the funnest game of Uno. And it's these moments where I know that she'll be grown one day and she won't live with me. And I won't get to play Uno with her at 1 in the fucking morning when I have to work the next day. And I could have come down hard on her, done so many other things, but I can zoom out and see that this is a precious moment and I'm choosing it. She's not making me. I'm choosing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else might say, well, what would you do if you decided it wasn't worth it? You don't want to stay up till 1 in the morning and play Uno. Then I'd have to explain that to her and we'd have to like really brainstorm together. I'd be like, sweetheart, like, oh, you know what? Last night I finally started losing my shit. I really did. And I had to have Will take over. I said, I'm gonna go rest. Will's gonna help you get in your pajamas and And then when you're right before you go to sleep, come get me. So I did. I tapped out. I have the ability to tap out. Oh my God. I mean, now Will's not around all the time, but things like that. I've found some, like, sometimes I'll say to her, I'm gonna go take a break and I'll be back in 15 minutes, and we'll time it like you do, even though she's 12.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm thinking about that word boundaries again, because it's not like, it's like you're saying I need a break for me, but then you're not just being like, I'm shutting the door now, figure it out, good night. Right?
Yes, and tonight we have decided we're gonna try to turn off our phones at 10, and we're really gonna try to be in bed by 11.
Together.
I also, like, in the long game, we're not going to stay up and play Uno every night. Like, just so you know, listeners, I'm not saying I've given up my whole sleep and well-being for my daughter. It's just that it's a long game. We're going to work on it now together, because she wants to go to bed earlier too.
Well, so yeah, just to like kind of go back to the word boundary then.
Okay,
like you said, Rythea, people are going to try to take that and say, well, Cara and Rythea in non-coercion are talking about boundaries when they're saying setting their boundaries for themselves. That means that I can do that and not control my kid, and so I'm doing non-coercion. But I think what's missing from just that explanation is then you go and collaborate on a solution to get both of your needs met together. Right?
Yes.
Just to be clear again, and I'm sure we've said it a million times, it's kind of like the non-coercion part is maybe like that's one thing, but then there's the collaboration, which is we have to have such an emphasis on that, because in my way, I'm not saying, baby, no, not right now. I'm not doing that. Deal with it. And like having her have her feelings. I could probably do that really gently too. I could say, baby, no, not right now. If you cry, you cry. Like, I'm here. I'm here. It's okay to cry. It's okay.
Well,
but
that's
I'm not doing that's gentle parenting, right? Yeah, that's like really, that's definitely out there and really common, but that's not what I'm doing, because I'm taking it then to the collaboration place to try to figure out how to meet her need. I can't always do it. I'm not a perfect parent. I don't always collaborate. Sometimes I feel like I'm actually at zero, and sometimes I'll do the classic gentle parenting thing where I'm just like, no, sorry, I know you're sad. I mean, I don't think I've ever really just stopped with that, but it's hard for me then to do the collaboration is what I'll say. Like, I don't always succeed in like figuring it out with her. Sometimes I end up she just has a tantrum and I'm just there with her, and sometimes I cry too. Because I feel like
and there's also, I can't. There's a lot, like, I have a lot of I can't. I'm like, like this, I was leaving to come here and she was having a play date and they wanted me to play with them. And I said, I'm so sorry, honey, I can't. I'm going to go do my podcast. And that's it. That's just that I can't. There's a lot of I can't.
So then
I just want to say, Cara.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of I can'ts, which most parents would just arbitrarily say I can't. Right. I have really broken this down to see when I really can't.
Yes.
Okay. So then there's the I can't. And then there's the other thing about collaboration. You're collaborating with someone who has none of the power. That's what parents really need to get.
Yeah.
You're collaborating with someone who has no chips to use. They have no hand that they can play. Your child is completely relying on your generosity to see them as an equal, for them to experience their power and experience their autonomy. That's how you can show up. So I kind of feel like we should give examples of our children really taking that and running with that, because I see it every day. My daughter is so empowered. It's incredible. It's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Well, yeah. In what ways? What ways are you seeing that now?
Well, I guess I want to talk about the conversation Tori and I had about creepy people.
Yeah.
We often talk. So this terrible late night thing where she tortures me and makes me stay up till 1 a.m. is also the time where she tells me everything. So I'm very torn about trying to change it. But anyway, one of our late night talks, she said she had just been on this dance retreat with her dad, where there's tons of people dancing, and she had a great time. And she said, you know what? I just find all the men creepy. And I said, oh, what does that mean? Tell me more. Like, a lot of enthusiasm. Let's talk about that, So we talked for a long time, and it became really clear that she's starting to have that age where men are looking at her and objectifying her. And that's new. And she's naming it as creepiness. So then we broke that down. What does creepy feel like in your body? Well, it just does. It feels yucky. Like I want to get away from the person. Well, that's why I was explaining when people are walking over your boundaries and how invasive it is to someone look at your body like an object, how yucky that feels to everyone and anyone, no matter what your gender is. And we talked about how girls can be creepy. We talked about how friends can be creepy. We talked about how am I ever creepy? Like I put myself in there with it, She doesn't experience me that way. But I said, sometimes I don't listen to your body boundaries. And I hug you when you said no, like I didn't listen soon enough. We really, really broke it down. And she talked about there's certain people in our community that she avoids because their energy just doesn't feel good. We actually went through all the people we could think of that we both find creepy. Some of them I don't find creepy, some she does. My friend also brought up neurodiversity, that sometimes people can seem quote unquote creepy when they're actually just not reading social cues.
Right.
So I want to talk to her about that because I don't want it to get categorized in a certain, that differences are creepy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But at the same time, after we had this conversation, she was so upset that people objectify. She couldn't even stand me to use that word, objectifying. I was like explaining her what that means. Oh, she was like, ew, I don't like to think about that.
Right.
I'm like, I was like, I know it's really gross. And I'm so sorry that we have to talk about this.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
so sorry. Yeah, this is gross. And it would be gross at any age, but when 11, you feel unprotected and you're just learning what that energy is when someone's looking at you. She said, sometimes someone's looking at me and they're staring at me and I don't know why. Or sometimes someone will tell me I'm beautiful and I'm supposed to feel like that's good, but it makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
So we talked for 45 minutes with my 11-year-old daughter. And at the end, she goes, this was a very hard conversation, Mom, but it was really needed. And I'm like, yes, it was very needed. And I felt so relieved. I felt a million times relieved because I'm always so scared that someone's going to hurt her. Obviously, I'm terrified of her getting taken advantage of. And every time we have a talk like this, I'm like, okay, she's listening to her body. She's telling me. She's asking me. She's taking in my opinion. And this is where I thought you and I, Cara, could talk about our childhoods, because what happened to me, because my parents were so controlling, was I literally stopped telling them anything and everything. I had a million secrets. I had a whole life that was separate from them. They never knew about. I tried drugs. I got sexually abused by all these people that they never knew about. I was in really unsafe situations all the time. I was totally unprotected because I couldn't trust them. I couldn't tell them anything. I was going to get punished if I told them things. So I basically had to create at a young age a completely separate secret life, which is just sick and terrible.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when a child feels controlled and scared of you. They have to create a separate world from you to feel safe. And then they have to test it out and try shit. And then they can't even tell you what happened because they're going to get in trouble. So that's what's wrong with coercion.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even that extreme, sometimes teenagers or, younger, even preteens, kids who then start kind of going outside the home without parent supervision. Sometimes they won't even do the extreme things, but I don't care. I want my daughter to be open with me. Regardless, I don't want to use fear and control, even if I feel like I have a kid that would never do such a thing. Right? Because you might think your kid, and you might know, you might actually know that your kid does not have that kind of temperament. I know lots of my friends growing up, they'd never messed with anything. They just they're just kind of chill. They play video games or whatever. And you might have a kid like that just doesn't have interest in, or friend groups like that, or, the opportunity.
Or doesn't want to push the edges. Not every kid pushes the edges.
Not every kid wants to push the edges. Not every kid is interested. They might, that's not where their priorities are, whatever. I was a kid like you. I did all sorts of boundary pushing and experimentation and going out late at my friend's house, but quote unquote, and stuff like that. I met my husband sneaking out of my bedroom window. That's how I met my husband as a teenager, sneaking out.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so there you go. My parents never knew until I think we were together 10 years or something. So
really?
That's the type of stuff. Yeah.
They didn't know you were together for 10 years.
No, they didn't know I met him sneaking out, I don't think, for years and years. I don't know if it was 10 years, it might have been 7, but it was a long time. I didn't tell them how we met. I said we met through a friend of a friend, which is true. but I snuck out at like 1 a.m. to meet my husband with a friend. Like they were driving in a car and I met them. So you might not have a kid that wants to sneak out or try drugs or has friends that, do any of that sort of stuff. You might have a very different situation. And I might too. Aaliyah, my daughter, might never want to engage with stuff like that, but I don't care. I still want her to be open with me, to feel safe with me, even if she's a kid who just has like interests that are very like wholesome and she's just hanging out at home or doing super age appropriate things. I still don't want to use fear to control her. I still don't want to try to go for obedience because I'd rather go for relationship, even if I don't suspect anything to worry about, you know?
Our children actually are having a deep inner life, and we would like to be part of that. It's not just about, I want them to be well behaved so they'll be safe. And by the way, it doesn't keep them safe.
Yes.
Children keeping their worlds from their parents doesn't keep them safe. It's just the opposite. But parents' excuse for control and coercion is, I'm keeping my child safe. That is usually what people say.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing parents ask when you tell them you're non-coercive is, how are you going to keep them safe?
Yeah. Yes, because even at the very basic level, right? When you tell a 1-year-old to not eat the stuff off the floor, as soon as you turn your back, they will. So this is
right.
it.
So you want them to use their own inner guidance system to make decisions. And that's from the beginning to the end, right?
Yes. That's why when we're setting our own boundaries and stuff, we're always going to the exploration part and the collaboration part so that we can guide them to a decision together.
Right.
Instead of just fearing, like shaming them to instill the fear of God into them so that they don't even ever try. Like I said no, and no means no. Well, that's not the goal because it closes the chapter and we want to keep it open. We want to keep it open.
I do have some clients who were the good girl or the good boy or the good child, who were well behaved and polite and did follow all the rules. And we're people pleasers, deep people pleasers.
Yeah.
And their lives exploded into hell as they became adults. It did not go well. It doesn't go well.
Yeah.
It's not a good game plan. It doesn't create close relationships with real intimacy. It doesn't create self-trust, self-love. It doesn't support risk-taking,
right?
Adventure, self-expression.
Yes. These are great points. I am thinking of several of my young adult clients. None of them are risk takers. All of them are high achievers and quote unquote, like well behaved. They've all have really strived their whole lives to meet the parents' values, right? Fulfill the parents' wants for them. So like going to particular universities or choosing particular programs or choosing particular jobs with their mother's wishes and wants and desires in mind. The mother figure in these clients that I'm thinking of right now has always pushed them in a specific way, and they are in deep distress.
Really?
Yes, they are their gold standard in their parents' eye. Their internal distress is like the as their therapist, I can tell you that they are deeply suffering and struggling in a ton of different ways.
That's fascinating. I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, they're really struggling to, I guess, follow their internal compass, right? Like they feel like they don't have a sense of self and they're really not sure like who they are. They feel very lost.
If you have a parent who loves you conditionally, you have to spend all of your time trying to get their approval and love, and you have to give up your own connection with yourself for that. That's what I was saying at the very beginning. You have to focus on survival first.
Yeah, so then by meet their needs.
You don't know who you are by the time you get to a certain age, because you spent all your time trying to get the love. And people do spend their entire lives just playing that out. It's not like most people turn the corner and then they realize they gave it all to their parents. No, they spend the rest of their life trying to get their parents' love through other people or acting out against it.
Have you seen the show Couples Therapy? If any of our listeners have seen it, she's in New York City and she's got couples of all different backgrounds, contexts, like people who are polyamorous, straight,
Oh,
gay. That
oh,
like there's a whole bunch of different types of relationships, and all of her work is centered around reenactment of childhood.
wow.
Yeah. So if our
That is
listeners,
so
you
cool.
need to watch it and let me know what you think. But if our listeners watch it, that's what you'll see kind of right off the bat is she very quickly goes into, well, tell me about your childhood. And then
Yeah.
the couples, where they get the most insight is from the exploration of how they're reenacting those patterns inside of their, intimate partnerships. And that's what I'm seeing with my children, like kid clients, my young adult clients. They're doing that in all other aspects of their life. Like they haven't been able to find themselves and figure out their true values because they've been working to please, to get that love. And they have not been able to find themselves. And that's what I mean when I say reenactment. Like couples therapy is a really great way to sort of see what that looks like. It's really cool.
That is like a big aspect of the therapy work that I do with my clients
Yeah.
is seeing how they're replaying everything in their lives. That is what we do. And we take that apart. And that's what inner child work is. You finally give your child the things that your child has been trying to get from everyone else. And that takes a long time. It really does take a long time. It's a long process.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to interrupt with our children
That's
in
right.
real
Interrupt.
time. In
Yeah.
real time, we're trying to not have our children have to focus on pleasing and avoiding and protecting themselves against us so that they can actually put their focus on developing themselves.
Yeah. And finding,
It takes so much work for the parent because none of us were raised that way. We have to tolerate them doing things that we don't want to approve of. We have to tolerate them failing and trying things and having Starbucks or lots and lots of candy or being rude or not having good play dates or not focusing well or not, we have to tolerate them having a fucking process.
mm-hmm.
For children to have a process just like adults have, they get to fail and try and try bad habits for a long time, and they are allowed to. Just because they have no power and they were born to us doesn't mean they don't get to have a process. Why do they have to suddenly live perfect lives? What the fuck is that? I hate that. And I'm working so hard to not have my kid do what makes me comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Working so hard. I don't think anyone has ever worked as hard as I have been working. No, that's not true. I know that's not true, but it feels that way. I'm gonna have to work tirelessly.
Yeah.
If I, as a parent, overpower my child, how is that going to be useful training for her to stand up for people who are marginalized? I don't see how that's like a good way to go.
Yeah.
If I'm silencing, crushing, shaming, rejecting my child's voice, needs, wants, opinions, impulses, personality, that I don't feel like that's going to foster someone who's going to feel empowered to create change and to stand up and have a voice. No, I mean, I just don't think that's, I mean, obviously people do. I was crushed and I have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I found it, but I also had to be in therapy for 30 fucking years. 30 fucking years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and also I feel like I have a voice, but it's always been shamed. So I hesitate to use it.
Yeah. But this is just an intellectual idea because it really has to do with parents might understand what we're saying, but you still have to work on all your reactivity with your child, and that's your work. They might be like, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. the idea that if you want to create a kind child, you have to be kind. Like, that's how that works. You can't expect your child to become kind if you bully your child.
Mhm.
But people don't even see people just think they're being loving when they set all these limits with their child.
That's the
They'll
thing.
say, I'm just giving my opinion. I'm actually guiding my child. I'm telling them that's not attractive. People won't like that about you. Like,
Yeah.
people think that their opinions are actually loving for their children. And that's what's so tricky. That's what's
That's
so
the
tricky when you
thing.
get into the denial of parents. I mean, you get into the self-righteousness of parents. It's like nothing I've ever fucking seen. Everyone agrees that oppressing children is just absolutely fine.
Yeah. Yeah, because when parents talk to me in session, it always goes back to their fear. If they don't, then something really terrible will happen, which is very hard to argue with. Yes, of course I understand
Yes.
your fear. I have them too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
It's the method, but that's the thing. That's what we're trying to break down. Overpowering your child to keep them safe is not a long term. It doesn't work long term. It doesn't work short term. It just doesn't work.
yeah.
That's the point. That's what we're trying to show, Cara. We're trying to show that oppressing your children doesn't work. It's not in their best interest. It's not in your best interest. It's not in the best interest of your long-term relationship. It's not in the best interest of their future.
Yeah. If somebody's scratching the surface with this,
Yeah.
if anything, they can start by thinking about the effectiveness of the approach of control, right? That's how I
Yes.
got into this actually, because I was using behaviorist approaches, right? Conditioning and stuff in all my practices before I got over here. It took a long time. But I realized after doing all of this reading and research and stuff, I realized, oh yeah, control actually isn't even effective because I experienced it as a teacher. Like I was such a loving teacher, like I was really kind, I had great relationships with my students, but then I would try to control like certain students or whatever, as their teacher and manage my class. And it wouldn't work for them, especially those kids that needed much more from me, much more of a different approach from me, a connected approach instead of an authoritative approach. Those students who just like didn't do well with authority. Those were the students where I was like, oh, fucking hell, this doesn't even work. I'm so good at classroom management though. And I'm also really friendly. What's going on? I was so confused. So I did a deep dive into all the literature I could find on actual connection inside of
Mm-hmm.
relationships. And I also was becoming a therapist too in my own study. So it just all went hand in hand. And I really came to this realization of, oh yeah, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So if people are interested in non-coercion, but they have no fucking idea how to, or what's the point, or maybe they're like, well, what if I just kind of control them when they're a toddler, or maybe I need to control them when they're a toddler in these specific
Right.
ways, maybe they
Right.
could start thinking about how, well, it actually just doesn't work. It's just not effective. Like the research on no, the word no, like there's a lot of research on positive opposites. So telling kids what they
Well,
can.
that really brings me to a little story of I run these support groups for parents, and we were doing our closing session, and I went around and asked everyone, has something changed for you? What has changed for you over the 6 weeks of this support group around non-coercive conscious parenting? Like, what has changed for you? And one parent said, he has little kids, very little kids. He said, I'm starting to question all my impulses.
Mm-hmm.
I say, you need to put your coat on. And then they don't want to. And then I stop and I say, why does my kid need to put her coat on? Let's really look at that. And he's starting to do that with everything. That's fucking amazing. That made me so happy when he said that. I said, right, question yourself. Question yourself. Just start there. All the have tos, start to question the have tos and look at what it's doing to your relationship with your child. That's the beginning. The beginning is question yourself, question your have tos.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ultimately though about their essence, trying to preserve their essence. If you make them wrong at any turn, that's the beginning of separation.
Mm-hmm. And Vivek says that, that it doesn't feel good to oppress.
Right.
That's something actually I probably should use when people ask me why I do that, because it doesn't feel good to oppress.
Mm. Yeah, it doesn't feel good to
Yeah.
overpower our children. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But to some parents, Kara, it feels really good to control their kids. They think
Yeah.
it feels really good on a wounded level where you don't have to face any of your own stuff. All you have to do is control your kid. That would feel superficially good. Like, for example, timeouts work, punishments work, consequences work. Everybody says that. No, but it works. Oh, yes, it short term does work.
Mm-hmm.
It does work. Your child will do what you say because they have no power and you're taking all this stuff away from them. Love,
You're afraid.
connection, all kinds of things. It will work, quote unquote work. You just won't be close with your child. That's all. Ultimately, you won't be.
Yeah. It's just really, I will say it's really, 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 really hard when you are a parent of especially a young child and you're doing things with them that people expect basic behavior, or basic parent responses to.
Mm,
They like your kid, like
like
if
what?
I don't know, just like your kid's 3 or something and you want to take them to a restaurant. Well, people will lose their shit if you take your kid to a restaurant and don't like tell them, don't touch that, don't put the water on the table, don't put your feet up there, be quiet.
Mm,
People will lose their shit because their experience in the restaurant is obviously going to be affected by like a kid that's
mm-hmm,
acting like a 3-year-old. So
mm-hmm.
I understand parents really struggling with non-coercion and feeling like they can't leave the house.
Well, what are your thoughts about that? What do you do? Your child's almost 2, right?
Yeah, she'll be 2 in May. Well, we still leave the house and we still go to brunch. We went to brunch on Saturday and she put her feet up on the table. She wanted to climb all over me. So I said, "Do you want to sit in the big chair next to me?" So she sat in the big chair next to me. She was happy as a clam. She started yelling at one point because Sanjay made the critical error of saying that the pancakes were on the way. Of course, they weren't ready yet, so that was very upsetting to her.
Uh-huh.
And what did I say to her? I said, "Oh, I wonder if we can be quiet like mice." And she was like, "Eek," and we just became mice for a bit.
Mm,
And then she got her pancakes, and then I gave her 2 forks so she could have one and I could have the other. And we were doing the 2-fork circus. It was just a lot of like playing with her instead of telling her no. I was just basically redirecting her the whole time and connecting with her in a playful way to
mm.
instead of like telling her don't do that or don't do this or don't put your feet up. Like I took off her shoes. I don't
I have
know.
to say, redirecting is also a tricky word. It's a fine word,
Yeah.
but people also do it all the time as a way to control. Right, look over here. Do you want a cookie? Like they
Yeah,
don't
to
want to be present.
squash their feelings. Yeah, I know. So true.
I love this example because you were just staying really engaged and
I guess I was just connecting with her the whole time with the things that she did want to be doing. Like I wasn't shaming her for yelling and saying like, "Hey, don't yell. We can't yell in a restaurant." I just said like, "Oh, could be mice and we could go squeak." And we just did that. Like it was just a playful, like yeah, the word I want to say is redirect, but obviously you're right. You have to be careful with redirection. You have to be
Mhm.
intentional with redirection. It's like setting a boundary. You have to be very intentional. You have to make sure you're
Yeah,
collaborating. Like that's what we're talking about here in this
yeah.
space. It's not a tool that I would use if she were crying because or her dad had to go to work, for example. So, like sometimes
Right,
Sanjay leaves for work and she gets upset and I validate that. I don't redirect and say, "Oh, look over here, have a cookie." I just let her feel
right,
that she is sad because he has to go to work and she's allowed to be sad about
right,
that. So
right.
you're right. Like you just have to be careful with the way we talk about stuff.
And also, there's a whole world of learning about you can look into about why we don't want to say no all the time because if once you start with that, you're just doing it all day long and your child is just hearing no to all their impulses and it's bad for their nervous systems.
Yeah.
It's bad for your connection. So it's kind of like instead of focusing on what you can do, what you can focus on, you're focusing on what they shouldn't be doing, and it creates a lot of shame because they want to touch this and they want to get into that, and now they're wrong. They're wrong
Yeah.
for it. And it just creates a real block in their bodies. It's not good for their bodies. It's not good for you either. But so I know that people will be, well, I'm too busy to engage. There's no way I can be engaging with my child all the time. But I think that's what I was trying to explain during this whole thing, is that when you invest in a lot of yes and time and connection, your child has a lot more bandwidth because they've been filled up with the connection. They have a lot more patience and a lot more ability to flow and stretch because they know they're going to get their needs met.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not just hearing no all the time.
Right, which creates a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you have a little kid, you need to baby proof your house so you don't have to say no all day. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You have to do that.
Yeah. That's right. Like if you don't want your kids' hands in the toilet, then put a lock there.
And if you don't want them going up the stairs, you got to get a thing in front of the stairs. You have to make it so they can have freedom, so they can have flow, so they can play and not feel scared of your voice all day long.
Well, see, that's the other thing too. People will say, well, I guess I just can't take my kid to restaurants then because they're not going to act like socially acceptable or whatever at a restaurant, right? People might say that.
Well, I did at some point have to stop taking my kid to parties.
Exactly. I was going to say that, like, if that's just, you're finding it impossible to not say no and do all that stuff, and that doesn't feel good. Like if you're here listening and you're like resonating with this and you're saying like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Well, I guess I can't take my kid to a restaurant then maybe not. Great. It's too much work for you. Like we won't do that every weekend because it just feels sometimes really exhausting and I don't have it in me.
Right. Exactly.
I had it in me on Sunday, so we did it, but it's not like we can do that all the time because restaurants are not appropriate for young children unless they have like a big play place or something. They're, take them to McDonald's maybe or something like that where there's like some place for them to go. But that's what I try to do is like just make sure that I bring her to experiences that she can be herself at.
Right.
But I do find it hard when people want her to be well behaved when we're just trying to get a coffee. If I'm not even sitting in, like I find that stressful. I find it like I'm very aware that my kid might yell while we're waiting in line because waiting is hard for her. And I find that very stressful. And I empathize with parents who feel like they can't go anywhere because I see that on Reddit. And I relate to that experience. That's how I feel a lot of the time. Like I can't bring my kid anywhere because she won't even, sit in her stroller for 10 minutes. My
child was not well behaved at all for many years, and it was very hard, and it was triggering, it was embarrassing, it was stressful, and because I put in the work, she's now deeply sensitive to other people's feelings. She wasn't for a long time because she was traumatized, because she was developmentally not needing to, she wasn't supposed to. There is a bunch of years where they're the center of their own focus, and that's developmentally appropriate, and it's a very hard time for parents to get that, but now she is,
and that's what I'm looking forward. I mean, I don't want to, I'm conscious to remain present inside of the young years, but I also want to say to parents that if you're looking forward to getting there and you're like me with a young child and you're trying to do non-coercion, you feel fucking exhausted and sleep deprived and like overwhelmed, then I am also you. And I'm still doing it as best as I can, and I fail all the time and I cry a lot, and yet we're in it together,
right? And you're putting it in, you're on the front end. This is the front end when you put in all the hard work on yourself. You're having hard work inside of yourself. That's what the hard work is. People think it's the children that make it so hard, but it's really whatever, all the shit they're triggering in us. And also how that interfaces with the world. It's a really tough world. It's a really tough world. It's not a kid-friendly world at all. It's not a parent-friendly world. It's not a mom-friendly world. It's just like it's a capitalistic shit show.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say the answer to that, I don't believe, is to control your kids so that they then fit into that world in a way that makes it easier for everybody else. That's just my perspective. I don't want to.
Love that. Will you say that again?
I just don't think the answer to the fact that we don't live in a kid-friendly world, that we live in like a very childist world, the answer to that, I don't believe, is to control my kids so that it's easier for those around her.
Right. And who do we need for the future that's coming in terms of our children?
Yeah.
We don't even know. We literally don't even know what's going to be needed. And we want to get the fuck out of the way so that they can do what they came here to do, which we don't know what that is.
Yep. This has been Your Kids Don't Suck. You can find me, Cara Tedstone, at www.caratedstonetherapy.com and on Instagram at Cara Tedstone Therapy. On my website, you'll find links to recommended readings and a link to my Reparenting with Mindfulness workbook, available now on Amazon.
You can find me, Rythea Lee, at www.rythea.com. That's RYTHEA.com. There you'll find published books, articles, and music, and parenting videos. Also, I'm on TikTok at Rythea Lee, on Instagram at Rythea Lee. You can book parent mentoring sessions with me through my website. And also I have an Advice from a Loving Bitch YouTube show that helps people heal self-hatred, and that's rythea.com/advice. It is important and essential to put our voices, Rythea and Cara, in a context. We are two white, cisgendered, straight, middle-class women living with financial and societal privilege. Because of this, our perspectives are limited and do not reflect the realities of all of our listeners. This podcast will feature guests with expertise around conscious parenting who differ in race, class, abilities, sexual orientation, and histories from us, to broaden the conversation and reflect the lives of as many people as possible. 25% of the proceeds of this podcast will go to creators of color who have been mentors and influences on our work and in our growth as parents.
If you like our show, please subscribe and stay tuned for more conscious parenting advice and insights. And check out our link tree at linktr.ee/yourkidsdon'tsuck to donate and connect with us.